I want to keep serving this region in Congress. I want to continue to fight for folks here. I grew up here. This is where my folks raised all of us on the east side of rural Clark County. I want to fight to make sure this continues to be the best place in the country to get a job or raise a family like I'm now doing with my 2 children, or retire. I'm going to fight to make sure we sustain the greatest jobs market we've seen in a decade. I have been Washington's leading advocate to stand up to Oregon and their scheme to put tolls on the I-5 and the 205 bridges. Another issue that's important to folks in this region are protecting Medicare and Social Security. I've found in my nearly 8 years in Congress that it is absolutely crucial, if you want to achieve measurable results, that you put policy issues above partisan fighting. My opponent talks a lot about civility at her campaign rallies, but then she very quickly escalates to blaming Republicans for everything under the sun and slinging mud at the president. That's not the only area where I'm working in a bipartisan fashion, but I will tell you that this race is shaping up into a real contrast. You know, when I supported the tax cuts bill this year, we launched into effect the greatest jobs market we've seen in a generation. 4 million Americans and counting are getting raises, bonuses, and better benefits. And she has another area where we are very different. She supports a $32 trillion Medicare for All plan that would bankrupt private insurance as we know it.
Hello, can you hear me in the back? Thank you to the Woodland Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. This is a great event, and what an outstanding response. I'm going to do a quick bio, tell you why I'm running, and then highlight a few issues. And then maybe I'll come back and talk about where my opponent has already told multiple lies. Because you know what? In today's America, the truth matters. I grew up in a rural community on the coast. My dad owned a small business, John's Fresh Produce. He taught me the produce trade, told me it was going to come in handy. I thought he was full of beans because I was going to go to college. But you have to pay for college. And the way I got to pay for college was by starting to work at Safeway. I started as a courtesy clerk, and within a month, I was on the journeyman's track, and I was a journeyman, UFCW, local 555. That's how I paid for college, and that's why unions are so important. That's how you get family wage jobs in America. I have been happy at Washington State University teaching political science, teaching public policy, and yes, teaching civility and politics. I'm here today because I'm alarmed at the state of our health care. I'm alarmed at the fact that the Republicans consistently, over 36 times, voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We also have to focus on other ways in which we can bring health care to rural areas, which is why my plan is looking first at a public option for the rural areas. Prescription drugs have gone up almost 300% since the time my opponent has been in office. We have to address wage stagnation. Let's be careful when we talk about the economy, because you can't just look at things like an unemployment rate and say things are going well. One of the reasons why the unemployment rate is lower is because people are working multiple jobs. Make sure individual taxes that are reformed and the cuts are permanent. Corporations have a permanent tax bill or tax cut. People do not. So I do want to change it. But do you know why I really want to change it? Because it is the most fiscally irresponsible bill that I've ever seen. And not only that, we then pass the spending bill, which further adds to the deficit and ultimately the debt. That is fiscal responsibility, and that is what I'm in favor of. But I've asked for 2 major debates. My opponent has declined. We're going to continue to ask for debates. Do you know why? Because when you debate someone, you can check their facts. You can tell the American people when they're lying.
Here's the reality. We are a co-equal branch, and we have been pulling that authority back in the form of allowing you all to better regulate yourselves, not the government. And that's why we've seen 4.5% unemployment in this region. We've seen almost a 10% drop across the board. That's why wages are going up by almost 3% for the average worker. That's why the average family in Southwest Washington is keeping $2,300 more of their money in their pocket a year. My opponent wants to take that money back. And it's interesting to me, she decries the debt that projected $1 trillion healthcare or tax cut bill would cause. However, her Medicare for All plan would cost 32 times that healthcare bill. It would double today's federal budget. So if you're really a deficit hawk, you need to look at the whole picture. That tax bill stimulated the economy. We have more taxpayers because of it. I don't think we need to redistribute your wealth. I want you to keep it.
I want to talk about the tax bill. As I said a few moments ago, there are parts of the tax bill that I think are fabulous, that help working families, and there are parts of the tax bill that help small businesses. But 83% of the tax bill helps corporate America and the high-income earners. 83%. Do I want to change that? Absolutely. But in terms of working families, the backbone of our economy, of course I want to make changes. So that's one thing that I would do. Let's talk about deficits and let's talk about the debt. In 2020, $1 trillion will be added to our debt every year that tax bill is in effect. And one of the reasons is because corporations and high-income earners are the ones who have permanent tax relief, whereas working stiffs like us only get them for a short amount of time. So there are many facets to homelessness. I think we have to increase people's access to affordable housing. I think we have to make sure that money stays in the Department of Agriculture to build rural housing. I think we need to do a much better job with mental health services. We also have to look at the opioid crisis and how that's contributing to homelessness as well. I also think we have to be very careful in how we treat people who have fallen on hard times, which is to treat them with respect, to give them the hand-up that they need, and to do everything we can both with the government, but also with our own private charities and our churches, our houses of worship, in order to help people who have fallen down on their luck. I also think we have to look at our veteran services and do a much better job making sure that they get the services they need, because an alarming number of our homeless are veterans, people who have risked their lives for us. We need to treat them with the respect that they deserve and make sure there's assistance at the local level as well.
I agree. We have seen the homeless numbers increase in Vancouver and other areas of our region. I think Veterans Services is another piece here, especially in our area. We have a great number, in fact, I think the most in the state of retired military service members or veterans. They love Southwest Washington. I also have worked hard to make sure that we supported the largest mental health overhaul in a decade. It was over $6 billion worth of services, whether it was making sure people have treatment options or making sure first responders know how to, when they're encountering someone on the streets, what to do. I believe in protecting our way of life here. I believe in stewarding our resources, which is why I've been an ardent supporter of protecting our federal forests and managing them so that they don't burn. That carbon tax, if put into place, has not demonstrated that there's going to be a scientific benefit, but it has demonstrated that it's going to kill our economy.
It's a good opportunity to talk about climate change and how climate change is real and it's human caused. Because that apparently is something we have to say these days, because, you know, facts matter, integrity matters. I haven't taken a position on it yet because we're still studying it. We want to find out how it affects Southwest Washingtonians, but I'm very much in favor of other measures to decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. We start by not taking money from them. The second thing that we do is try to pursue clean energy projects that we could bring to Southwest Washington. I believe strongly in the power of unions. I think they've been decimated over the last several decades because of these so-called right-to-work laws. So I will be a union champion, not just continue playing defense, which we've had to play for years, but also playing offense.
I support anybody's right to form a union and earn a living wage. I have taken steps, sometimes at odds with my party on this issue, but the right to work legislation is actually not as much an issue here in Washington State. We have those rights. In fact, in some areas it's forced unionization, depending on what your industry is.